here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Well, on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, your big time game on CBS is going to feature those #1 Oregon Ducks once again. This time they're on the road in one of the great coliseums in all of college football, the Big House in Ann Arbor. Now, this season has not gone as many expected for Michigan, and we've got even more sort of news as we look at that Michigan offense, as Jack Tuttle has announced that he's shutting it down. He is retiring. It is another concussion for him that is having him walk away from competitive college football. So I guess it's Davis Warren. I guess maybe an Alex Orji situation. A lot of question marks there for Michigan at the quarterback position. But I guess, Tom, I want to start off, with having gotten that intimate look at Oregon's, fast start and dynamic offense over the weekend. I mean, do you think Michigan's defense has enough to be able to slow down Dylan Gabriel and the Ducks, given the way that they are flying right now?
It's tough to answer that question without knowing the complete status of Will Johnson. I think that if Will Johnson isn't playing in this game and he's unavailable, no. I don't think Michigan has enough to kind of slow down the offense. I'm not sure that anybody in the conference truly does, because we saw earlier in the year, Ohio State is what we consider one of the best defenses in the country and one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, and they couldn't stop Oregon, especially at home. Of course, Michigan being at home, maybe that gives them a bit of an edge. But when I look at this situation, I mean, it's basically the same situation Illinois was in last week. Like it's election season, so I'm just going to use this. They have a very narrow path to victory if they're trying to figure out how this is going to happen for them. And I think if you are Michigan, the only way you can truly do that is to keep that offense off the field and try to control the clock in this game to limit possessions and hope you can force a few turnovers and a few mistakes to make that happen. We all grew up playing, NCAA football and Madden. You know that when you win the coin toss, you always want to kick off to start the game so that way you can get the ball to start the second half. This is one of those few times where if I'm Michigan, I think I want the ball to start the game, because I don't want to put myself in a situation where if Oregon gets the ball and they go right down the field and put me in a hole immediately, I don't want to have to chase from the start when my offense first gets out there, because my offense is not built for that. I kind of want to just control the clock, churn this thing as much as possible, and see if I can turn it into a 8-9 possession game for each team just to try to keep it close.
8. I mean, Tom, that might be generous, but I think if you're Michigan, you want to play like a 6-possession game here. Yes. In all seriousness, I'm looking at my preseason notes, and I wrote, any defensive back injury for Michigan are a problem. Like, they can say whatever they want to now about how they're confident in the backups, but in the preseason, that was not the case. And we knew that if they had any big guys go down, it was going to be an issue. And Will Johnson, obviously being the biggest and the baddest guy for them, if he doesn't play, that's a pretty big deal. Let's recall back 3 weeks ago when Oregon torched what is probably a better Ohio State secondary, certainly a better one if Will Johnson's not in there. I think the path for a victory here for Michigan, kind of as Tom was saying, hold the ball, possess the ball, make it look a lot like the USC game, except it's a lot harder to do that because Oregon's a heck of a lot better, than USC is. It's going to come down to those two beasts in the middle for Michigan on the defensive line. Like, we know Oregon had a little bit of question mark about the interior defensive line. Ohio State did not do a great job of taking advantage of that, really causing them consistent trouble. But I'm not 100% sure that all those issues are gone, right? Like, they're improved, but who have they faced after Ohio State? Not really anybody who would give them a ton of trouble in there, with all due respect to Tom's Illini. So if Michigan wins this game, it's got to be because those two guys just absolutely beat the snot out of those in Oregon interior 3 offensive linemen, caused a lot of problems, got turnovers, and just the ugliest game of the year that Michigan fans will think is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, TJ Guy, the defensive line of Michigan has to win up front. They've got to be disruptive. The issue with it is that Dylan Gabriel has been so good and continues to get better getting rid of the football on time. It's one thing, and it's such, he's such a veteran, experienced quarterback, and Will Stein has done a great job getting him up to speed where he's comfortable in this. They know that could be an issue. So they're ready to go to a plethora of weapons that they can get the ball quickly to. And that gets very frustrating, gets very taxing on a defensive line to keep putting forth that effort and not get the reward of getting a sack or a big hit on Dylan Gabriel. But I agree with you. They are the ones that could make this game ugly, which is totally what Michigan wants to do. Michigan has clearly issues at quarterback, but at least now with the retirement of Tuttle, I think it's Davis Warren's show. But they're not going to stop using Alex Orji. Like, this is the thing that's kind of wild. I think now we just know, hey, he's kind of a wildcat, and you're really only going to sprinkle him in there if you're going to try to throw ball deep somewhere. They've got to be able to get the run game going. You cannot turn the ball over against this team. Khalil Mullings has kind of taken that role as lead back, as Donovan Edwards has taken a step in the backseat. I've tried to talk myself into, like, where is Michigan? It's a home game. Is Oregon overlooking them? You know, they're traveling across multiple time zones. I just think if Michigan wants to have a chance in this game, Oregon has to be a little bit off. You know, like, I mean, that's like, and yes, you can help dictate that by getting some of those interior pressures and maybe getting a tip ball where you get a turnover, but they have to hit on every play that's there. Oregon, I think, is just so good. They usually, are very smooth on offense. Their defense all of a sudden is becoming an issue for everybody they're playing with. Matayo Uyunglele stepping up. Derek Harmon's also a great defensive player. So I just think this is a matchup where Oregon can overwhelm Michigan pretty much across the board.
Well, let's take a step back and let's sort of look at the big picture for Oregon, because they last time they got up to number 1 back in 2012, they lost the next week. And the way that they have been playing has been, to your point, Danny, it's been getting better and better with Dylan Gabriel. It's been getting more consistent with the offense. Danny, how do you think that you have changed your big picture expectations or thoughts about Oregon in terms of not just where they fit in the Big Ten, but where they fit among the best teams in the country as we start to turn our attention over the next several weeks into, the race for a national championship?
Oh, I think Oregon is the clear-cut best team in the country, and that's coming from somebody that picked them to win the national championship before the year, was ready to bail after watching Idaho and Boise State, saying, uh-oh, but was trying to keep everybody calm, saying, look, a lot of new moving pieces, injuries on the offensive line, and the thing that's been most impressive is they've gotten better and better, and there's players all over the place, NFL talent. I mean, Jordan Birch is a player who hasn't played in a few weeks. When he comes back, I mean, he's the best player on that defensive line. The offense, think about it. They got 2 running backs, Jordan James and Noah Whittington, who both are capable of carrying the workload. They've got a tight end in Terrell Ferguson, who, when he's healthy, he's a weapon that you have to deal with. And then they've got multiple receivers, starting with Tez Johnson, who Dylan Gabriel knows how to get them the ball in space. And that's the other thing. Will Stein knows how to get those players in advantageous matchups so that it's very easy for Dylan Gabriel to get to him. He's very accurate, so he keeps them on the run. You get a lot of yards after the catch. I think they're the most complete team in college football. And I felt like other teams were in that zone. Like I felt Texas was. But Texas failed in their biggest test against Georgia, whereas Oregon, in their biggest test against Ohio State, they answered the call and came up big with the win.
I don't know that I'm necessarily there as being the clear-cut number 1 team in the country, but I do think that Oregon has an argument to be the number 1 team, and I don't know that we have a clear cut this year. You could tell me Georgia's best is better than Oregon's best, or maybe vice versa. You could tell me, hey, maybe Ohio State plays a better game if they play them a neutral site, like they did lose by a field goal in Eugene. So if that game's in Columbus, Buckeyes probably win. I mean, Texas has looked great at times this year. I do think that offensive coordinator Will Stein is getting more comfortable calling games for Dylan Gabriel, right? You have a different type of receiving core this year. You have a different type of quarterback. Like Bo Nix was pretty good for them last year, and obviously he's doing pretty well so far in the NFL. But Gabriel's a different type of quarterback, a little more limited physically, having to use his brain a lot, and trying to figure out ways to call games for them. I've been encouraged by what I've seen, though. I think it's pretty impressive.
And this is a really good football team. There's really no kind of other way to say it. Are they the best in the country? I don't know. They're going to have an opportunity to prove it. Like they've got, if you look at the rest of their regular season schedule, it's hard to see many losses on there. So you can pretty much pencil them in for a Big Ten championship game appearance, and you could probably pencil them in for an at-large in the playoff at a minimum. So we're going to find out just how good they are compared to the other elite teams. But as I watch this team, it's pretty evident week in and week out, like they're getting better. mature. They're figuring things out. They know who they are, and they're not messing around. Like, they're not playing with their food. They're coming out in the first quarter, in the first half against these teams that they're supposed to beat, and they're snuffing out any semblance of hope that those teams might have immediately, because they know that the only thing that could really impact the game right now is letting the other opponent actually believe it has a chance to win. And they're telling them right away, no, you don't. It's going to be a long 3 hours, and you're going to go home sad. The only thing I look at as far as this game is concerned, just trying to nitpick to find a reason to think maybe Michigan has a chance to win the game, is if you look at who Oregon's played on the road, it's been Oregon State, UCLA, and Purdue. Not exactly great teams. In fact, UCLA and Purdue are combined 1-8 in the Big Ten, nor are they the kind of environment to play in. Like Purdue, I'll give them some credit. That Friday night game at Ross-Ade Stadium, they were hyped early, but the game was over quick and it kind of quieted down. Will the environment of playing in the big house in a very loud stadium who's actually screaming when you have the ball instead of when your opponent has the ball, will that impact them offensively? Because if you do look at the numbers, their game plans, particularly in the passing attack when they have been on the road, slightly more conservative than they have been at home. They're not taking as many deep shots. They tend to stick to shorter, more safe and efficient throws. So we'll see how that impacts it. But again, it's as far as the game's concerned, it's just hard to see Oregon losing to anybody left on its schedule.
In 1964, there was a very famous argument before the Supreme Court that led to a comment of, quote, "I know it when I see it." And that's kind of how I feel about Oregon as a national title contender. Like, will Oregon win the national championship? Who knows? But they're getting better. They're balanced. They're well-rounded. They have counters, and they have answered the call. So very excited to watch them this Saturday on CBS, kickoff 3:30 p.m. Eastern time from Ann Arbor, and continue to follow the Ducks in their pursuit of championships in their first year of the Big Ten.